13 million people are sleeping on top of a loaded gun. They know it's there. Their government knows it's there. The scientists who found it published the evidence in 1987, testified before state legislatures, briefed FEMA, and updated their projections every decade since. Nobody moved. The Cascadia subduction zone runs 700 miles along the Pacific Northwest coast, underneath Portland, underneath Seattle, underneath Tacoma, underneath every city and suburb that grew on this coastline after geologists mapped the fault beneath them. When it ruptures, not if, FEMA's own models project 27,000 dead, 1 million displaced, and 1.5 severed in so many places that the region goes dark for weeks. That is the disaster. You've seen disaster documentaries before. This video is about something else. This is about the meeting where they looked at the report and approved the building permits anyway. The San Andreas gets the movies, the headlines, the cultural fear. The Cascadia fault gets ignored, and that is exactly why it's going to be worse. The San Andreas is a strike-slip fault, 2 plates grinding horizontally past each other, violent, localized. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake lasted under a minute. Cascadia is a subduction zone. The Juan de Fuca plate is being forced underneath the North American plate right now, at this moment, at roughly 40 millimeters per year, the width of your thumb. Constant pressure, building for centuries. When the plate finally loses its grip, it doesn't just shake the ground, it drops it. In the last Cascadia rupture, January 26, 1700, coastal land fell between 3 and 6 feet in under 4 minutes. Then the Pacific Ocean moved in to fill the space. The shaking in a full magnitude 9.0 rupture would last 3 to 5 minutes. For reference, the Northridge earthquake that collapsed Los Angeles freeways and killed 57 people in 1994 lasted 20 seconds. Cascadia would be 9 times longer, and the shaking is not the worst part. Here is what separates Cascadia from almost every other disaster on this channel. The science did not come after the destruction, it came before. In the 1980s, USGS geologist Brian Atwater was studying coastal sediment layers in Washington state when he found something that shouldn't have been there: a ghost forest. Ancient trees, still standing, drowned in tidal marshes. Trees that had been at sea level, and then, in a single event, had dropped below the waterline and stayed there. He carbon dated the trees. Then he found the confirmation he didn't expect. Japanese government records from 1700 documented an orphan tsunami, a wave that struck the Japanese coast at night with no preceding earthquake reported anywhere in the Pacific. Officials recorded the damage. Nobody knew the source. The wave had traveled across the entire ocean from a coastline with no written record, no European settlement, no seismograph, just drowned trees, and a wave that killed people on the other side of the world. Atwater matched the dates. Published in 1987, the scientific community validated the findings. Oregon and Washington commissioned their own studies. Those studies confirmed the rupture history and the recurrence interval. A full Cascadia rupture happens approximately every 200 to 500 years. The last one was 325 years ago. Oregon received the science. Oregon understood the science. Oregon continued issuing development permits in the inundation zone. Here's the part that stops people. You might assume that once the science was clear, once the USGS published, once state governments commissioned their own confirmations, the building codes changed. The vulnerable structures got retrofitted. The hospitals and schools in the rupture zone got rebuilt to survive what was coming. Here's what actually happened. Oregon updated its seismic building codes for new construction only. The existing building stock was left as it was. As of 2023, Oregon had completed seismic retrofits on fewer than 12% of the unreinforced masonry buildings its own assessments flagged as high collapse risk. Portland's City Seismic Vulnerability Study identified up to 1,600 buildings at high or very high risk of collapse. Not abandoned warehouses, schools, fire stations, the police precinct that would coordinate the response, the hospital closest to the zone. They're still there, still assessed, still standing exactly as they were. In the 38 years since Atwater published, one number has grown consistently in the Pacific Northwest: the population. This is the part that doesn't make it into the disaster documentaries. Because the people who made these decisions were not corrupt. They were not deniers. They had the OSSPAC reports on their desks. They had the FEMA briefings. They sat through the testimony. They had a different problem. Retrofitting Portland's high-risk building inventory would cost an estimated $2.7 billion. Updating the full Pacific Northwest building stock to current seismic standards would require a figure that no state budget could absorb in a single legislative session, or 10. So the system did what systems do when the cost of action is certain and the cost of inaction is deferrable. It produced studies. Oregon's Resilience Subcommittee delivered its landmark Oregon Resilience Plan in 2013. It was detailed. It was rigorous. It projected that a full Cascadia rupture would isolate the Willamette Valley, Portland's Valley, for weeks. Bridges destroyed, hospitals damaged, emergency services overwhelmed on day one. The plan's recommended timeline for adequate preparation: 50 years of sustained investment. The Oregon legislature received the plan, acknowledged it, allocated a fraction of what was needed, and continued approving new development in the fault zone, because growth is real and taxable and immediate, and the earthquake is probable and catastrophic and not scheduled. Every year the fault doesn't rupture is a year the math holds. Every year the fault doesn't rupture, another 30,000 people move to Portland. FEMA ran the numbers in 2013. Here is what a full magnitude 9.0 Cascadia rupture produces. Approximately 27,000 dead, 10,000 from the earthquake, more than 10,000 from the tsunami, which arrives at the coast between 15 and 30 minutes after the shaking stops. The remaining deaths from infrastructure collapse, fire, and medical system failure in the days that follow. 50 or more bridges destroyed or rendered unusable across Oregon and Washington. I-5, the only north-south artery between Portland and Seattle, severed in multiple locations simultaneously. The Portland metro area functionally cut off from ground resupply for 1 to 3 weeks. 7 million people requiring some form of emergency services. 1 million displaced from their homes. FEMA Regional Administrator Kenneth Murphy put it plainly in 2015. The Pacific Northwest is not prepared, and the realistic recovery timeline, not emergency response, not disaster declaration, but return to something approaching normal regional function, is measured in years. That assessment is now 11 years old. The gap between what Murphy described and what has been built since is smaller than the gap between what the science demands and what the political system has delivered. The models have been updated twice. The essential conclusion has not changed. One more thing the documentaries leave out. The Cascadia fault doesn't have to produce a magnitude 9 to be catastrophic. Seismologists have mapped segmented ruptures, partial breaks that release between magnitude 7.0 and 8.0. These happen more frequently than the full event. They're large enough to collapse the unreinforced masonry on Portland's high-risk list, trigger landslides across the coastal ranges, and damage critical infrastructure, but not large enough to trigger the automatic federal catastrophic response that a magnitude 9 generates. A magnitude 7.8 segmented Cascadia rupture could kill thousands of people in the buildings that have been on the assessment list for 15 years, and do it in a damage envelope the federal system wasn't pre-staged to handle. The scenario everyone prepares for, in the rare moments anyone prepares, is the worst case. The more probable intermediate case is the one the response system is least positioned to meet. That's not a geological problem. That's a planning problem, and planning problems have authors. Before the cities, the knowledge existed. The Chinook, the Clatsop, the Tillamook, coastal nations of the Pacific Northwest, carried oral traditions describing great waves from the sea that swallowed the low ground. Traditions that ethnographers dismissed as mythology, until geologists confirmed they were precise generational memory of the 1700 rupture. The instruction encoded in those traditions was specific. Do not build permanent settlements on the low coastal ground. When the earth shakes, move to high ground immediately. When European settlers arrived, they didn't ask. They built Astoria directly on the coast, in what is now a mapped tsunami inundation zone, and put a hospital there, a school there, a police station there. They built Portland at river level in the Willamette Valley, 70 miles inland but directly inside the shaking radius of a magnitude 9. They built Seattle on a peninsula, Tacoma on the Sound, and then paved it all, wired it all, filled it all with people. By the time Brian Atwater published his findings in 1987, the infrastructure was already in place. The political cost of acknowledging the full scope of the problem, the cost of admitting that the growth of the last 40 years had been built on an unaddressed geological debt, was higher than the political cost of studying it further. So they studied it further. They are still studying it. The fault has stopped waiting. There is one honest thing the emergency management community says about personal preparation for Cascadia that almost nobody repeats. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, the first 72 hours after a full rupture will be entirely on you. Roads gone, power gone, emergency services at capacity within the first hour. The federal response, even if it mobilizes perfectly, cannot reach you through severed highways and collapsed bridges in the first 3 days. FEMA doesn't say 72 hours of food and water. FEMA says 2 weeks. Most households in the rupture zone have less than 3 days. The gap between what the science says is coming and what most people have actually prepared for is not a gap in knowledge. Everyone knows. It's a gap between knowing and doing. The link in the description is a 2-week emergency food supply, long shelf life, no refrigeration, built for exactly the scenario we've spent this video describing. It's on Amazon. The link is an affiliate link that costs you nothing extra and keeps this channel running. The fault doesn't care whether you clicked it, but you might. January 26th, 1700, 9 p.m. local time. The Juan de Fuca plate released 3 centuries of accumulated pressure in a rupture that lasted approximately 4 minutes. The wave crossed the Pacific in 8 hours. Japanese officials on the other side of the world recorded the damage and called it an orphan tsunami, a wave with no known parent. Because the parent was a coastline nobody was writing about yet. For 285 years, nobody in Western science knew what caused it. Brian Atwater found the trees, read the Japanese records, published the answer in 1987. That was 38 years ago. Since then, the Pacific Northwest has grown by 4 million people. The unreinforced masonry buildings are still standing. The fire stations identified as collapse risk are still the fire stations. Portland is still approving development permits in the valley. The fault has had 325 years. We've had 38. One of those numbers is moving in the wrong direction. Cascadia is a fault line that science found, government acknowledged, and the political system chose to manage at the pace of budget cycles instead of geology. The next video is about a different kind of threat, one that doesn't rupture a coastline, one that buries a continent. Beneath Yellowstone National Park sits a magma chamber so large that geologists don't call it a volcano. They call it a supervolcano. The last time it fully erupted, the ash reached the Mississippi River. Scientists at NASA have a plan to stop it. The plan would take 50,000 years. That video is next. Subscribe.